Unconventional Life. This is your host, Jules Schroeder, in Lake Atitlan, Guatemala. This is the show where we inspire and empower people to live a life by your own design. Today's guest is Gabrielle Bonneville, the co-founder of Momentom Collective, an organization that intersects yoga, the arts with entrepreneurship, where they have 3 different residencies worldwide in Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Bali, inspiring those to co-train, co-work, and co-live. Unconventional Life, welcome to Lake Atitlan, Guatemala, where we have Gabrielle Bonneville joining us. She is the co-founder of Momentom Collective, a artist residency for entrepreneurs that combines the arts of co-training, co-working, and co-living. You currently have properties all over the world, including Nicaragua, Bali, Guatemala, which is where we are currently, and are impacting over hundreds of thousands of people since you started this about 2 years ago. So welcome to Unconventional Life. Fill in any gaps that I might have left out and give us a glimpse into your personal life.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Jules. My name is Gabrielle. I'm co-founder of Momentum Collective, and if we could describe it in any way, it's a new age circus where we combine movement acrobatics with introspection practices. And it's been such a great hit. So many people have been interested in coming to learn about this new way of living, basically, and traveling. And we've been able to expand into a few different places. And Guatemala is a beautiful place created by an amazing man, and yes, just training.
Yeah, I love that. And I think so often when you think about the circus, Cirque du Soleil, comes to mind when I think about growing up, when I thought about beyond just clowns and, your neighborhood circus, but what circus and the art of circus represents. And I know you're from Montreal, from Quebec City area, and you've really been in the heart of this ecosystem around circus and really are at the evolution of what it looks like in modern day, especially for millennials. So tell us a little bit about what you were noticing with the trend of circus and how this is innovating this industry in so many ways with what you're doing with Momentom.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who's ever been to Montreal can attest of the beauty of circus culture. It's ingrained in the culture of the city. Everyone is playful and authentic, and there's this secret rule where you just accept people for who they are. And the more authentic you become, the more self-expression that you can implement into your daily practice, the more accepted you become into that society. So growing up, it was really amazing because my whole family is in the circus, and it's, yeah, you're right, clowning, acrobatics, but it became more of how to become a community. And the way that circus has really impacted this project is because we're learning so much on how gypsies and nomads are kind of the same thing,
Yeah.
They value the same kind of traveling purpose. So Montreal is very ingrained in its city, but now Momentum is really taking it out from Montreal, learning what's best practices and bringing them forward into how to become nomadic.
What I love about the nomadic culture is that it's literally built-in networking. When I used to think about networking when I started my career about 10 years ago, it looked like pretty nice cocktail dresses, a certain clientele of people, usually during a 2-hour window, and definitely with a cocktail. And when I think about millennials and how they've modernized really the value of health and how they've modernized the value of deeper connection, networking has taken all of these different forms. And the part of the nomadic culture is you're constantly meeting people from different countries, different backgrounds, industries, and relatively people you wouldn't inherently intersect with in your daily life. And so I find that giving yourself opportunity to make more connections and different types of connections not only expands your point of view, but it also expands your center and realm of creation. So I find yourself, if you've been stuck with the same people, whether it's the same set of coworkers, the same set of friends, or maybe even the same town for a long time, get out there. Start by just having 1 or 2 conversations with someone who you feel like wouldn't normally be in your sphere. That's such the beauty of traveling, is that you get to push yourself outside of your comfort zone and ultimately be reflected more knowledge about yourself, which I find inherently just gives you more creative potential to expand in your growth of your business and the things that you really care about in your career. Yeah, I love that. And your story in and of itself, I'd love to know how this all started, but you were at the United Nations, at the UN, for the last, several years before starting. And so, we were talking and you were in Morocco when this idea hit to kind of move to Nicaragua and try this out. But how does one go from the UN, which a lot of, our listeners might be like, that would be my dream job, to be at the UN and to be working with human rights and activism, but then really moving into this new concept and, just give us a little glimpse of what life was like in the path to, getting this whole thing started.
I mean, yes, it feels like such a life away from here, but I did the whole getting a master's and getting a job, and I was honored actually to take part in the United Nations. I mean, it's a huge vehicle, and their intention at heart is to promote international human rights. And for me, at that stage of my life, it was amazing. After a few years, though, I realized that my main interest was about, the real change that happens in the world starts from within. And I just remember being in my office and being like, I have no idea who I am and how to express that authenticity. And it was just an impulsive, intuitive reaction to a greater desire to know myself better.
Yeah.
So I did a yoga teacher training, and then it opened so many doors, and at the same time circus has always been part of my life, so it just ended up being the way, it sounds cliche, but I feel like the universe really just aligned for that moment in my life for me to learn from the United Nations and to becoming more of myself.
Yeah. I, when you think about that moment being at your desk or at your desk job, I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that, where you actually pause and you ask yourself, and it's like, who am I really? And I think that's the whole spirit behind the movement of the Unconventional Life, is this waking up to, I'm not just, this job title, and I'm not just these set of clothes if I'm in professional dress, or I'm not just what people say me to be. And so what advice could you give for those that might be hearing this and be like, Gabrielle, yes, that is what's happening in my life right now. And what have you learned along the way about really starting to answer and even look at that question of who am I really without, these models that you've just inherited or that you've chosen to come into?
Jeez, that's a great question, Jules. I think we're all trailblazers in our own way. And I think that it all starts from an introspective space. I think that for the peak performance of an individual, there is a balance between introspection and the idea, again, of self-expression. But introspection comes in many ways. It comes in meditation, it comes in vipassana, it comes in psychedelic journeys, it comes from being aware of your breath.
Yeah.
And taking the time to be within yourself every day allows for you to have the space to introduce the right thoughts into your mind that will inevitably create the realities that you want for yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the main advice I would give my younger self, and to your listeners as well, is just take the time, whatever way or form that comes intuitively, excitingly for you, to take it every day. At least 20 minutes, because it does take 20 minutes for you to be able to get into a different brain wave. And then that way you'll gain more clarity, and clairvoyance is actually a thing. And it's something that you can practice, and it's something that elders and our ancestors looked into a lot. And if we tap into these ancient practices, there is a way of unlocking something that is beyond the physical world.
Yeah, I love that. It very much rings true for my journey, and I think in so many ways it's the heart of what you're doing with Momentum. It is very much, the mindset behind really coming into yourself, accessing your creative potential, listening to yourself, and being in the journey. So for some people, the hero's journey of who you are and figuring it out. And so let's talk about the concept of co-train, co-work, and co-live.
Yeah.
Because there's been so many, co-work, co-live, the rise of the digital nomad, working remotely, even corporations really starting to back their employees to go for a more digital approach. And how did you see that trend? Because I know you're very much an innovator and you look far and into advance, and so how have you seen that trend, and how have you adapted based on what you've been noticing?
Again, good question. I think it has to go back to doing an international politics master's. I started seeing the world from a larger scope, bird's eye view, I guess, and I noticed different trends while I was studying that in that conventional education platform. But I also started noticing my own desire to travel, you know? And when I was traveling, there was this thing where I would go to hostels and the idea of meeting new people was amazing. But then it became like a little too repetitive.
Yeah.
And as I became more interested in entrepreneurship and also really prioritizing training of the mind and the body, I noticed that there was a lack of spaces for that. And I love being around people that inspire me, and co-working spaces really provide that platform.
Yeah.
Because the level of quality of conversation is so top-notch. But what about as an artist, though? Where do I find that training ground, the silks, the juggling balls, the space to do clowning workshops, and even this, and that's where I saw that there was something lacking.
One of the things that I love behind Gabrielle's mission with Momentom Collective is intersecting the arts with entrepreneurship, but ultimately underneath that, it's the value of prioritizing self-care. You know, you look at these modern companies, offices like Google and WeWork, where there's beanbags, there's juice bars, there's even jungle gyms inside. And for now, with all these companies, it's really becoming a necessity to take care of yourself first so that you then ultimately can perform better and more optimally. And so I find coming to a place where you get to intersect passion and art and expression is literally a built-in accountability system for you periodically to get up off the computer, away from your desk, and really fuel your entire body. Not just your mind and your mental body with the work that you're doing, but really your physical body and your emotional body. So ask yourself, is there one little tweak, even for those of you that work from home, or even of those of you that aren't in a modern office, that you can start incorporating into your daily life right now so that you start serving your entire being, so that you can ultimately start serving others to even more potential?
And I also saw that the millennial generation is looking to become more nomadic. And I'm also seeing that the millennial generation is living from a place of heart, creativity, and truth.
Yeah.
And to have that the space for exploration is primordial in our progression and spiritual development. And spiritual development is also in line with our entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
So that's where that was born out of.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, I think too what's really great, and especially about the people you attract, is that they're not always, you know, just artists, or they're not just entrepreneurs. They're really looking for the hybrid of both. And you know, millennials, like we joke, it's like we love our green juices, we love our yoga classes, we love our good Wi-Fi, we love our great view. But there's a lot to that, and to be able to combine the arts and ultimately a way of taking care of yourself. I think at the heart of it, it's self-care, and it's serving your whole human needs beyond just needs of career, or beyond just needs of passion or artistic expression. And so I love that you guys are bringing all those things together. And so for those that are hearing this, you know, the last 2 years, especially starting this movement, you guys have gained a lot of traction. And in starting a movement very quickly, especially one that's been born out of nothing in a lot of ways, what has been a key to some of your success in really gaining the credibility in places like Montreal, where you're starting to really make a name for yourself, where, you know, the traditional model is like, who's this Momentom Collective? And then other nomads are finding you from, you know, so many different countries. And so what's been the driver?
Okay, so intuitively I've got 2 responses. Number 1, my mother used to say, tell me who you hang out with and I'll tell you who you are. So I surround myself with the right people. And it's not, this space is for everyone, but it was born from a desire for me to be surrounded with business entrepreneurs, energy healers, and badass artists. And by me being in that space, I'm able to develop all 3 areas of my life. Number 2, I would say my team. My team is so bomb. I mean, they're my spiritual guides, and they're so great at what they do in terms of business. The vision is so aligned, and we have space for growth as well, so we have space to introduce the right people into our lives and to partner into the future so that we can align our visions with something greater. So I would say, yeah, those two things.
Yeah. So awesome. And I know your growth literally is almost 400%,
Yes.
which is wild. And you're, expanding into Bali and then potentially even Europe next year, which is incredible. And I love that you mentioned team. I think that working in a collaborative space also is such an inherent value of the Unconventional Life and of millennials specifically. And what do you think's worked really well with keeping your team cohesive and ultimately weaving together shared vision and shared reality as you move forward?
I mean, communication is the key thing, I think. And as we expand, we're able to find different mediums of keeping that quality of communication high. It's also to provide space for those around you to do the things they thrive on doing. So no one on our team is doing things we don't like to do. Like, we've got the geeks that like to do the accounting, and they geek out on that so that I can be doing the things that I love to do. So I think that providing that space for independence and that trust, that collective work is going to bring you so much more farther than the conventional thought of doing things in your cubicle and doing things on your own, So the idea of uplifting each other and prioritizing one another. And also one thing we do is that once a year we do get together in Montreal and we train and we co-work together and we envision together the future. And I think that that's the most important part.
I love that. So last question for you. When you think about the unconventional life, what does living an unconventional life mean to you?
Oh my God, well, what we're doing right now.
Recording in Lake Atitlan, Guatemala, out in a garden.
Absolutely. But you know what? This moment is really representative of what unconventional life is. Not because you're the founder, but all the synchronicities that we were able to observe and also ultimately create into our lives to bring us forward into this exact moment and to be so present with the realities that we've been able to construct for each other. I think that's the best way of looking at living unconventionally, is to tap into our inner power that we don't often speak about, but that we can be more aware of the synchronicities, the coincidences, and that envisioning what it is that you want in your life.
One of the things that I love that Gabrielle talks about is really trusting your flow and looking at all of the synchronicities, as she calls them, that lead up to the big pivotal moments. So if we break this down more specifically, what I mean by that is we're always receiving information from our external environment. So often we're getting cues, we're getting signals, whether that's in the form of a job promotion or in the form of being fired or in the form of a friend saying, hey, do you want to come travel with me to this country? We're constantly in the realm of receiving feedback. So the first step is really to ask yourself, bringing awareness to what feedback am I receiving? And are you able to actually press the pause button, take a step back, and look at what is your environment trying to tell you? And if you can look at the subtle nuances from, hey, this conversation with my boss didn't go so well, maybe it could be a clue to something else that's unfolding. Or the subtle nuances of, I'm so excited to try this endeavor, that could also be a clue to what's unfolding. And gradually, as you take each piece and put it together, step by step by step, you really live a life that is in alignment and in a life that is in flow, that ultimately allows you to just trust in whatever is unfolding in every moment.
So I think that living unconventionally is just to drop into the unknown and to live through the passion of your highest excitement.
Trust the path, everyone. Gabrielle Bonneville, co-founder of Momentom Collective, Unconventional Life family, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you, Jules.